So in today's video, we're going to talk about electric vehicles, but this is not your typical video where you talk about the environment and all these freaking losers that like the Cybertruck, alright? This is an actual look at the engineering and practicality of having one of these devices in your life, especially if you charge with off-grid solar. I think there's lots of misconceptions and people are very political about this topic, and whenever I even mention EV, it's like my most disliked video on the channel. But I think EVs are really good for certain things, and I think a lot of people are overlooking that because of their political bias. Also, people think that it's easier to control people with an EV, but with the new gas cars, they're just as easy to control from the government and from the corporations. And the right to repair for both is awful. So I've made a list on my phone and we're going to go through all the pros and cons, but I won't put you to sleep. This is going to be quick and fast, and I want you guys to consider the whole picture because I don't think people are. But first, let's start with misconceptions. When you fill up an EV with electricity, it's usually from the grid, and the grid has its power supplied by natural gas, coal, and a whole bunch of other stuff. In some places it's more coal, in some places it's not. But guys in lifted trucks are always like, oh, they're powering these EVs with coal. And you know what? At the end of the day, even if you do that, it's more efficient than a gasoline vehicle. But that's not the point. I'm going to say that whether you use a gas or electric vehicle, and you're using the grid or the oil refining process and oil extraction, both make you dependent on the government and corporations. If the grid were to go down, your truck and your EV would be screwed, okay? But with an electric vehicle, you can build your own off-grid solar power system, or hydroelectric, or whatever you want. I personally want small modular nuclear reactors. I do not care. I just like not being dependent on the utility provider, on the government, or any corporation, whether it's gas or electric. At least with electric, you can actually build your own charging system today. So at the end of the day, I don't care where you get your energy from, but I think you should get it from yourself. You should build your own system. If you're an American, and the whole idea of being an American is being independent, having freedom, and building your own things, building your own world, instead of having some other central planning entity, then why don't you build your own system at home? Instead of complaining, there's all these guys with lifted trucks and they're like, boo-hoo, the corporations didn't give me this, the government didn't give me that. It's like, you guys are so weak. Why don't you do it on your own? Build your own world. Stop complaining about all these other things. You guys look pathetic. And that leads me to the next thing, is about the government controlling vehicles. And there is a good argument for EVs to be controlled remotely. They can turn off your car, and eventually in the future, I think they'll be able to repo themselves. But the same is true with gasoline vehicles as well, and also the right to repair these vehicles. And everyone criticizes the EVs, but not the gasoline vehicles. I would love to see you guys make a transmission control module and make all the CAN bus on your own in your backyard. It's going to be very hard to take care of these gas cars that have planned obsolescence. They're not like older Toyotas. You just get a relay and you throw it in there. You have all these control modules, and they all have their own third-party software. And if something screws when you're out of warranty, you're screwed no matter what, whether it's EV or gas. But with an EV, it's a battery, an inverter circuit, and a motor. You can make that work on your own with your own software a lot easier than a gasoline vehicle. And a lot of people will say, oh, I'm a mechanic. I know how to swap parts. That doesn't mean anything. If you can't get those parts, your big gas vehicle is going to be completely useless. Technically you can do it, but most people can't. Most people that say they work on their cars just swap parts out. And me and my dad have made fun of those people for a long time. You are entirely dependent on the parts supplier. And a lot of stuff like these transmissions, they're sealed, there's no dipstick, and they don't want you working on them. Whether you get an EV or a gas car, you're still screwed when it comes to some of these devices. Now last year there was a company here in America that made a patent for a repossessible car system. And guess who that was? It wasn't Tesla, it was Ford. All-American truck F-150 remote operation that they can take your car at any moment, or they could shut it down. And there was even legislation in that Build Back America Better plan or something, and there's remote kill switches in there for all cars by 2026. So again, whether you have an EV or a gas car, you're going to have remote control and remote operation in the future, I'm thinking. Which is why older vehicles are preferred now, because they can't control those, and you can actually buy parts that interchange interchange with everyone. If you get a Bosch relay or a Bosch alternator on an old Toyota, you can swap those parts out and it works, and you can stack up a bunch of them. But all these new vehicles are going to have these electronic control systems that are going to make it very, very difficult to work on. Like I said, you can't just make this stuff in your backyard. Some of you guys can, but 99% of you guys that swap parts aren't going to be able to do that. And for an example of something strange is my GT4 naturally aspirated track car. It has a SIM card in there. I do not have GPS or navigation or anything. Okay, there's nothing in that car that needs smart features or connectivity. It is a race car, right? And for some reason, there was a recall on the SIM card. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And they said it's in the dash, and they said that it's part of the vehicle. And I still don't know what that thing is for. Why does it need to have connectability if it's a track car? It just doesn't make sense to me. So I think whether you buy a truck, a sports car, or an EV, everything is going to be connected soon. Which is obviously bad, but with an EV, it's just a battery and a motor. If you have your own software for the inverter circuit, which a lot of people hack already and the software is readily available, you can make an EV run without any government entity. I think a lot easier than a gas car. When you have all these engine and transmission control modules with third-party software with this huge CAN bus system, I think that's harder to work on than an EV. EVs are dead simple. There's not that many parts. I think if you have an EV and a gas vehicle and both are remotely disabled in the future, I think it will be much easier to get the EV to start working again. Look at all those conversion kits with the Tesla motors and those LG and Tesla battery packs. It is easy to control those batteries with your own BMS and to control the inverter circuit with open source software. It is not hard. But battery charging is actually pretty complex, especially if you want to do fast DC charging. All the temp sensors and the cooling system, everything has to be perfect on the EV. But it's not impossible, and you can always charge at a lower rate without any sensors, really. I mean, if you have a lithium iron phosphate battery, just the thermal mass of that thing, you can charge at lower rates all day and not have any cooling system. But if you're pushing NMC to the limit, you need to make sure the software is perfect. Anyway, moving on. Next is degradation curves for the battery. So some batteries are badly designed and you have to replace the whole pack even if the BMS fails, like a Tesla. And I hate that about Teslas, and that's why people don't want to buy them outside warranty, because you're gonna have to replace a whole module if one of them goes bad. And again, it's not the battery cells, it's the BMS or something else. And companies like Rivian actually have that separate, so you can access the BMS and replace it without replacing the battery. So the Rivians in the long term might be easier to repair on your own. But the degradation of the battery and not having a complete battery failure because of some other thing, but the battery cells themselves are lasting a very long time. There's people with hundreds of thousands of miles with only 10 or 15% degradation. The batteries are actually doing much better than what we anticipated. If they were doing worse, I'm pretty sure it would be all over the news and people would be like, this is not a good technology, but no one is talking about it except for the consumers. They're like, I'm not going to buy that because the battery might need to be replaced. The battery does not need to be replaced. The battery management system typically fails. But the battery themselves are doing so good and people are not giving due credit. It really sucks. The technology is coming so far and the battery prices are still going down even with inflation. So it really shows how good batteries truly are. And it's improving rapidly. Every single day there's more and more battery breakthroughs. And even with manufacturing in China, BYD is still cranking out new stuff. So yeah, I think there should be more appreciation with what's going on in that sector. And some EVs are badly designed and you have to replace battery packs and it costs tons of money, but some other ones are not going to have that issue, specifically Rivian. Or you could make your own BMS. You don't need any of this. But when the whole module is sealed and everyone says, oh, I don't want to buy a new battery for it, it's like the battery's fine. It's the battery management system that's not fine. That's a design fault. It's not a battery fault, okay? So it depends on the EV. They're not all the same, and the batteries are doing incredibly well. Next is the risk of fire, and in some situations, if you crash an EV at a very high speed and it reaches that battery pack and it starts combusting and you get thermal runaway, it's gonna catch on fire. And that's just a fact of life, no matter how good the charging system is, whatever. If you damage that pack, it's gonna eventually, it will catch on fire. but the risk of fire from a gas car is just as high. And no one seems to complain about hybrid fires because they never happen, just like EVs. You might see some reports on older EVs where the pack was physically damaged and then it caught on fire. And that is unfortunate, but the risk of fire is still higher with gas cars. Because think about how much energy is in a gas tank. I just had a fuel pump go out. The fuel system is not perfect in a gas car and you can still get fires. Next, the grid cannot handle electric vehicles. There's lots of articles and YouTube videos disproving this, and in some places they can't. For example, California, they have this dream of having EVs everywhere and they're trying to power them with the grid, but they don't have enough capacity for energy generation, so they have to, get it from Arizona natural gas power plants, and you have these massive transmissional losses, and then they're already in debt for other things, and now they're running a deficit. Anyways, not places like California, okay, but other places you can easily and absolutely today run EVs from the grid and it will support it. But why are you guys so dependent on the utility provider? Why don't you be an American and build your own system and charge your own car? Why is it that people always complain about the utility? The daddy government isn't going to give me my grid that's big enough to run my electric vehicles? You sound pathetic. Build it yourself. Stop depending on the government. It's ridiculous. You'll have these guys with lifted trucks and they talk about how independent and libertarian they are, and they use the government and these corporations and subsidy things for everything. It's like you are not American at all. Next, oil and solar subsidies. People think it's only solar and EVs that get subsidies. You are wrong, okay? And also, oil is regulated, taxed, there's subsidies, there's all this government intervention. Why do you guys support all of that? I thought you're American. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Also, I don't think there should be solar or oil subsidies at all. Let the market decide. I'm a staunch free market advocate, and I don't think most people are. And even though you guys call yourself American, it doesn't seem like you're actually American. Next, EVs are expensive, and they are more expensive, but most people are so poor that they can't even afford the gas cars. Look at the average price of an SUV or trucks, right? Most guys that drive trucks don't need a truck. Most people that buy SUVs don't need an SUV, and they spend $55,000 to $80,000 on these SUVs and trucks. You guys cannot afford these. If you can't afford an EV, you absolutely can't afford these expensive gas cars. If you look at the personal savings rate and consumer debt right now with credit cards, you guys shouldn't be financing any of these expensive cars at all. Whether it's gas or electric, I don't think it makes that much of a difference. And if you get a big lifted truck with big tires and it's getting like 6 miles to the gallon and you're spending half of your income on that thing, that's illogical. How can you criticize an EV? With an EV, if you charge it off grid and you get one that's efficient and small and great for going around your city, it's fantastic. And if you do need cargo capacity or you have lots of kids, you should get a minivan. I think minivans are way more usable than a big truck. But people are not buying what they need. They're buying what they want and what they think looks cool. And then they keep criticizing EVs when EVs, if you buy a small one and you charge off grid, it is fantastic and it can be super cheap. If you're financing a car, I don't think you should buy it. That's always been my rule. You should never finance a car. You should always buy it with cash. That's an opinion. I've had like 80 cars now, but that's what I do. I have zero debt. And I'll lead this by example. When I paid off my first house, I was still driving a Prius. It was very old with lots of miles because I knew it's not responsible to buy the nice cars until after I have my house paid off. Not everybody can do that, but should you buy a more expensive house if you can't afford it? Should you buy more expensive anything if you can't afford it? I don't think so. Easier said than done, but being in debt is a big trap. You guys should not be in debt. I don't think it's American. I keep going back to that. You should be independent. You shouldn't have to borrow money all the time. I hate this debt economy and banking system. It makes us weak. Anyways, let's move on. Next is range issues. If you're trying to drive a long distance with an electric vehicle and you have to charge and it's cold outside so your range is reduced, it's not very fun. I can still do it because I live on the West Coast and there's chargers everywhere. So for me, there's no issue. But for some of you guys that live in like North Dakota or something, it just doesn't make sense at all, and I understand that. That's why for those instances, you should have a gas vehicle. Next is battery recycling. That is not an issue again. The degradation rate on these batteries is so low. The problem is the BMS and everything else around the battery that's failing, okay? It's not the battery cell itself. Those things are doing incredibly well. Battery recycling is a massive business. You can make money off of that. There's rare earth elements inside each one, and there's a lot of people that want to make money off of that. And even Tesla has their own battery recycling facility, but they don't really use it because there's not as many batteries as they anticipated needing to be recycled. So again, I think that is a non-issue. It's a massive issue with older hybrids or with other chemistries of batteries that are not good for the environment, and the recycling process was very difficult, but not with the new chemistries. Like if you have a lithium iron phosphate battery, you're not just going to throw that thing away, you're going to recycle it, and people can make money off of that, and they can use it over and over again. And if it has cobalt, they're never going to throw that out. You're going to get that cobalt. You don't want to throw that in the trash. That doesn't make any economic sense. So when people say that about battery recycling, it just doesn't make sense to me. Next, people complain about cobalt mining in Africa, and they say, oh, there's child slavery in those cobalt mines. Yes, and why doesn't anyone get mad at Africans for enslaving their own children? Why is that? No one criticizes any of the atrocities that happen in Africa on a daily basis. Nobody gets mad at Africa or Africans. You don't need to use children for cobalt mining. You can use machines. It takes an upfront investment, but it's better than using child slavery. And for some reason, people don't understand this, and no one gets mad at Africa. Nobody gets mad at Africans for some reason. I don't get it. But they are to blame. They are the perpetrators. They are causing it. They are selling their own children. That is wrong. That's not okay. And cobalt won't be used in the future. Everybody's switching to lithium iron phosphate. Have you seen the new battery packs for the Rivian? Also with the Teslas, everybody wants to have less and less cobalt. So again, that's not going to be an issue. And then people are going to complain and say, oh, now you're not supporting Africa because you're not supporting the local miners. It's like you can never make people happy with this stuff. It's ridiculous. But I don't see it as an issue at all. And with lithium iron phosphate and everything that we use on my channel, there is zero cobalt. Okay, there's no cobalt. So there's no children slavery mining. Lithium is not an issue at all for mining lithium, but lithium processing has been a massive issue. Also the abundance of nickel. But no one complains about anything that actually matters. They only complain about the thing that can actually be fixed, and that they never criticize the actual perpetrators. It just doesn't make logical sense to me, but that's the world we live in for some reason. People can't make that second step thinking, like, why is that happening? What is causing this? Like, no one can think about how things work, like the root cause. It's crazy. It's the same with medical. It's the same with everything else nowadays. It's just pathetic. Next and final misconception is the price. Everyone complains about the price. If we had a free market and we let other countries bring their EVs here, the price of EVs, they would be way cheaper than gasoline vehicles. Look at how much you guys pay for gasoline vehicles and how much a Chinese EV is. The first Chinese EVs were garbage. The new ones are very good, at least from all the initial reports. I don't have my hands on one, so I guess I can't conclude that. But it seems like they're doing a better job than us. And they're not just copying American manufacturing, they're inventing their own manufacturing methods. That's something people do not understand, especially with lithium iron phosphate. Look at the BYD Blade battery. That wasn't us, that was China. Okay, they are inventing their own stuff now. If we could have those cars here, it would be much cheaper. You wouldn't be spending 50 grand on a vehicle. It'd be like 10 to 20 grand. And if you want a luxury one, it would be 30 grand. Just look up the videos of these new vehicles over there. They're really nice. But the software I would question. I think the Tesla software is by far the best right now. But anyways, I digress. If we actually had a free market, which America was supposed to be, and we had all of the options available to us, and we had more competition, I think they would be much cheaper and they would be better. And the technology would advance very quickly, but it's not. We have the government controlling everything now, and we don't have a free market. Just let these companies do what they want and get rid of these stupid federal tax credits, these federal subsidies. I hate all of them. Just get rid of all of it. Everything that the government subsidizes turns to garbage. For example, corn subsidies. It makes sense during World War II or whenever it was crafted, I forgot. But nowadays, the reason we have high fructose corn syrup is because corn is so cheap to make. Or corn oil, or all the other subsidies that we have. I don't like any of them. I hate it. Stop having the government control everything. The government should be more limited. Now we're gonna talk about the pros and the cons. That was just the misconceptions that drive me crazy, but now let's take an honest look at the good things about EVs and why I think people should consider them if you can afford it and if it works for your life. So first, you can charge with off-grid solar. There is nothing cooler than that. You can make your own system in your backyard. You can throw solar panels on the ground in 20 minutes, wire up some cables to an all-in-one, and then plug in an EV charger. There is no cooler time than having an EV than right now being able to charge with solar for so little money. Even if you had 10 solar panels and a 6000 XP, you can charge an EV. That's all you need. It's not that much money now. It's really nice. Next, there's practically no maintenance. I've had 8 electric vehicles and 3 plug-in hybrids. Electric vehicles are the best by far. You only have to change out the tires. And people love complaining about the tires. If you drive the EV like a normal car and you don't race it and get hard on the turns like I do with my race cars, well, guess what? The tires last a long time. The last set of tires on my Model X, which is their biggest, heaviest EV by Tesla, actually not anymore, the Cybertruck I guess is bigger, but the Model X should go through tires like crazy. I lasted 35,000 miles on a single set, and they were the sport tires. So that's incredible. I don't think that's an issue at all. You know, the maintenance on a gas car is pretty bad. You have the oil, transmission fluid, coolant, and the brakes. You have to replace them more often as well. So gas cars are pretty darn expensive and annoying. When you have to go to the gas station, go to the oil change place, and go to all these places, with an EV, I can just let it sit here, charge it on my own, and I don't have to go anywhere else except for the tires. But again, the tires are not a big issue. It's the only maintenance thing I have to do, and it's every 35,000 miles. That's pretty darn good. Next, they're very fast, and they can get you out of tight situations very easily. That instant torque is fantastic. And once you get used to it, it's hard to go back to gas cars. Also, the traction control on an EV is superior. I think they can control and update the position of the wheel and everything 1,000 times per second is what I read before. Even the best Bugatti, like just multiple $1,000,000 sports cars, they can only do it 3 times per second. And if you look at that wheel on a slow motion camera, you can see the twisting of the gasoline engine, and it makes for a very messy movement. Check out those videos. You'll see the grip of the rubber like going do 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 do. It's not as good as an electric vehicle. With those motors, they are so smooth and they rotate the tires so well. So if it's snowing or raining or whatever, having all-wheel drive electric vehicle is superior. And you can test that. Take an EV on the track, push it to the limit, and you'll feel how the traction control works versus a gas one. The gas one kind of just slows you down so you don't crash the vehicle. But the electric one, it can modulate it so nicely. And if you have 4-wheel motors, you can have torque vectoring at another level. And once you get used to that handling capability, you never go back. Even a rear-wheel drive Tesla, if you push that thing to the limit, the handling is incredible in all sorts of weather conditions. So again, it's really nice, and once you try that, it's hard to go back. Next, the center of gravity is lower and it's harder to flip. In most of them, you can't flip. Try to flip a Model X, it's nearly impossible. The weight of that battery is so significant that it just keeps that car planted to the ground like no other. And I like that. For safety, it's fantastic. Next, the safety rating of an EV is better. They have massive crumple zones without an engine. Even on a really nice Toyota, look up the Toyota Tundra or the Tacoma, it pushes through the firewall, the engine, and it can completely smash your legs. Look up the crash reports, it's awful. Any gas vehicle is no comparison to an EV in a crash, in my opinion. And not my opinion, why am I saying that? From the safety regulations, whatever, that's why they have the highest safety scores. That's why. They have these massive crumple zones on all sides, and like how they're built, it's just easier to build a safe EV. It's more difficult to build a safe gas car. Next, let's talk about the cons. So the insurance premium. It is true, it costs more and the repair time is awful. I've had lots of EVs. I've had 8 Teslas, like I said. I've had multiple crashes. They were not my fault, but I had to get the car repaired and it took multiple months. So that is an actual con of electric vehicles. But gasoline vehicles, to get parts nowadays for my gas cars takes weeks if not months as well. But the EV is still harder to repair at this moment, and I do not like that, and the insurance premium reflects that. So you have to spend more on the insurance, and sometimes it's a lot more. But insurance premiums are going up everywhere for every type of vehicle, and gasoline ones are very expensive as well for SUVs. So yeah, compare the prices and you'll be surprised. The lowest cost vehicle I've ever had to insure is a minivan. It's more useful than a truck, it's cheaper to insure, it's easy to maintain. I think a lot of people should buy minivans. They have a low center of gravity, they have a very low loading height, so it's very easy to put lots of groceries in there. But for some reason, people don't like minivans, but I think they're like the best thing ever. If you're worried about the cost of insurance, why are you trying to insure this massive truck that you don't use for truck things, or you're buying an SUV that you really don't need? I think you should buy a small car or a minivan. That's my opinion. But the electric vehicles are harder to repair and they do cost more to insure, so that is a con. Next, bad design. There is so many bad designs in the electric vehicle space. The Cybertruck, okay? The Rivian, if you get a fender bender in the back, it can cost upwards of 40 grand to fix that. Like, why is it that electric vehicles have the worst designs on the planet? Like, they're trying to be different and technological and sci-fi. I think it's all junk. I think that they should stick to simple car that everyone can use, everyone can fix easily, easy to repair bumpers, just something that people can use. I'm so tired of the Cybertruck stuff. And the cost to insure a Cybertruck with those stainless steel panels, if you don't have Tesla insurance, it's probably going to cost a ton of money. And the repair time is going to be obscene. So yeah, I absolutely hate the design of EVs. You can even tell when a car is an EV. You're like, oh yeah, it looks a little goofy, it's probably an EV. Look at the i3. I do actually like the i3, it's a pretty fun little car, but why do they make them look so stupid? I just hate the EV designs. They need to focus on easy to repair and simple, aerodynamic, and be done with it. Next, there's no spare tire because of the weight and because of the efficiency. They want to have the best range, so you have to get a tow truck. If you live in a really cold or hot place, and your EV breaks down because you have a flat tire, you're gonna wait hours sometimes to get a tow truck. And I do not like that about EVs. They need to have a spare tire that's rated for the weight so you can just get to a tire center and fix it. And I've actually become really good at plugging tires now. So those little repair kits with the plunger thing, I have repaired like 3 or 4 in the last year. So I'm really good at doing it now. If you have an EV, you should get that. I think the Rivian actually has a spare tire, which is pretty cool. Next, the dependency on software. EVs don't need to be dependent on software. Okay, they can make a simple EV without all these smart features. I would love for Tesla to come out with a car that has no smart features, nothing, no navigation, nothing. It's just an electric vehicle for $10,000 cheaper. If they say their software is worth so much money and so important, it would be nice if they had something cheaper without all their expensive software. I hate software. There's always going to be some problem with it, especially when they have over-the-air updates. They send out a bad update, everyone's car is being stupid, and then you have to update it again. I don't like that. I like simple. I like easy to repair and simple. Next, right to repair is just awful. Whether it's gas or EVs, EVs have the same issue and it sucks. The right to repair, there's Rich Rebuilds, there's all these other YouTubers that talk about it. It's a major issue and I hate it. You should be able to work on everything that you own and it should be your vehicle, not the manufacturer's. Next, new technology means tons of issues. Look at the Cybertruck. What a piece of garbage. Like, have you seen the rear view mirror camera system? Like, they just don't think through things. I guess this goes back to bad design, but it's really bad for EVs for some reason. So most EVs, I think, are impractical. And with all that tech, if you have it outside warranty, fixing that's going to cost a lot of money, and I don't like that. It's all bad. Next, the charging infrastructure. This is massive, okay? If you have a non-Tesla, forget it. Just don't buy it. People will disagree with me. They'll say, no, it's fine, Will, around town, blah, blah, blah. I don't use EVs around town. I use them for everything. I go on road trips. I use them every single day. I like to be able to charge wherever I'm at. It's convenient. As much as I like charging at home with off-grid solar, I still like the option to charge. Okay, so when I go on a road trip, I like fast charging, and Tesla has the best network. I bought a Porsche Taycan, I drove it to Los Angeles, it was a nightmare. The amount of hours it took extra just to charge that stupid car was ridiculous. Fantastic car, so much fun to drive, but the charging infrastructure was horrible. So yeah, they're gonna have NACS on pretty much all electric vehicles in the next year or two, but do not buy one without it. I don't care how much of a discount you can get, unless you know you're not gonna leave your town. But yeah, I like the North American charging standard with Tesla. Fantastic system. So I'm a big fan of that. Now let's do a hypothetical situation. Who should buy an EV? I think most people that live in a city and they're stuck in traffic all day and they have to commute a lot and they have a home or a place to charge it should buy an EV. For daily trips, that's all you need. You don't need that lifted truck that's $80,000 and that insurance premium and all the maintenance costs on that thing. You don't need a big SUV, okay? If you need space, buy a minivan, like a hybrid minivan, fantastic, like a Toyota Sienna. But for most people, a small EV is fantastic. And most people can actually afford one. If you look at the average cost of a vehicle and how much a used EV is, which is practically new, you can afford one. And over time, the cost of energy will increase and the cost of gasoline will increase, but batteries are going down in price for now. Until manufacturing capacity is really big, it's going to keep going down for a while. So if you pan that out over the next couple decades, I think people will only be able to afford EVs after a certain amount of time without any regulations. I hate when they say, oh, the government this, the government that. I don't care about that. I think, like I said earlier, they should get rid of all subsidies for oil and solar and everything else. Let the markets decide. But if you look at the manufacturing tech, it will come to a point where you'll have no choice but to buy an EV. And it's through your own choice, okay? If you can afford a gas car, like the rich people in the future, I think they're gonna drive their gas cars as a status symbol because they'll be like, look, I can still afford gas, I can still afford all this stuff, I can still afford the risk, and they'll think of it as a flex because the EVs are gonna be so ridiculously cheap that you will not be able to afford a gas car. And I'm against all legislation making you go for EV or gas or whatever. I don't really care. I think that whoever has the best tech and whoever can deliver the best product for the lowest price, that's what you should choose on your own. I don't think the government should have any say. I hate this not having a free market, especially with EVs. It's ridiculous. And I hate the subsidies as well. The federal tax credit, all these incentive programs, you shouldn't have any of them. If EVs are better, people will buy them. If they're not, they won't buy them and they'll stick to gas. Let the people decide. And that's pretty much it for this video. I rambled on a lot, but I hear this stuff all the time and it drives me crazy. And after owning 8 electric vehicles and 3 plug-in hybrids, also, one more thing. Plug-in hybrids, if you actually have one, you'll find that it's not worth it and you should have got an electric vehicle anyways. And I did not understand this until I owned both of them. A plug-in hybrid, what you really want to do is run that as on electric as much as possible to save money, right? But now you have an engine to take care of and all the complexity of all of those systems. So the chance of something failing with all that tech is much higher. So I do not like plug-in hybrids. You should either have an electric vehicle, or if you have to tow something and you actually use trucks how they're meant to be used, buy a truck. They make absolute sense right now. I mean, look at these electric trucks. They're a complete joke. Be honest with yourself and your life and your specific application and what you actually need. And a lot of you guys might actually like an electric vehicle, especially with how I see you guys spending all your money right now. Like when I look at my neighbors and how much they make and what they spend their money on. So just check them out. Don't let your political bias or whatever. Think about your life and think about what you need and think about all the options available. There's lots of pros and cons, but keep an open mind. There's lots of options that people aren't realizing because they're not being honest with themselves, in my opinion. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.